Okay, this is going to be my first long form video on YouTube and Rumble as well. Looking for my story time content, we're going to be delving into most aspects of the mind, the mindset, and we're going to start off right at the beginning, identifying basically the two different worlds that we reside in, our internal world and the external world, our ego and the results of the material world essentially, and how the two marry, and how when both are not in alignment, that is a very dangerous place for us to be, and how it can be more dangerous at certain times in our life. This video is centered really more about men's perspectives of themselves, and how if both of these things within and outside of ourselves is not in line with what we're doing or too distant from each other, then we'll experience a great deal of pain. And this is to give you the insight to why it is dangerous for you to have so much ego and have very little action, or have very little ego and try and do so much action, and how when that is not aligned, you will end up hurting yourself. So we have the internal world, and then we have the external world. In the internal world, it is essentially the mind or ego. I'm not going to get into the separations of that, because that's not necessary for this. And we have the external world, which is reality. This is when people say you're not living in reality. Let's say, for example, I walk around telling everyone how great I am, when in actual fact, I am a very poor performer in all metrics, but I still believe that I'm the shit. Ego. If I work really hard at things that have zero leverage, but I'm always putting in energy towards something and have no ego towards it, then I might self-sabotage myself and say to myself, I am not capable of doing such things, so I'm going to work incessantly and not even attempt to do something that I most likely deserve, simply because I just don't believe in myself. But I'll tell you the situation that the most dangerous of us have, because if you're going to have a huge ego, how can I represent huge ego? You know, big head, small body. If you're going to have a huge ego, and really you're just going to be, you know, lying down, chilling. This is a bed, and you're just going to be lying down, chilling. That is a place where you're going to attempt to manipulate whoever's around you, whatever your reality is, to try and get what you want, because you do not do anything to get what you want. Now, there's a midlife crisis point that happens with most men, which is mid-30s to mid-40s essentially. This is actually the period of time where most men commit suicide. And this is my theory into it, because it is a biological point where we understand death is to come. We have enlightenment of that, and we now understand what we've always had a desire for what we want, but now it looks like, is this going to be real or not? So both worlds start colliding at this point. There's a certain point when you can believe you the shit and just relax in it and be okay. There's a point where this now needs to meet this. And if the ego is so high in I am the shit, I am amazing, but I have zero evidence of that, you will have an ego death and you will need to create a new identity. What happens is, if the ego is so high up here and your actions are all the way down there, this whole thing will inevitably come crumbling down, and then you may not have the right knowledge or equipment to now regulate your mind properly once again with what you are. Essentially, it's the same goes for confidence. We can believe in ourselves and be confident. How it's an Alex Hormozi line. I am confident just by the reps and the evidence that I have that I'm this person. So if I'm out here getting all these results, let's say result here, result here, result here, result here, result here, this will naturally increase the size of my belief system, because I'm now using the real world to enforce my mind. That's what's happening right at this moment here. When you're attempting to build it on this side and increase it here, which you can do, you can sit and meditate on it. And if it makes you feel good, you'll love staying in here. But if you just go back, chill, watch Netflix, and you're building up nothing here, this will rise and this will fall. And ultimately, let's say someone was to fall from such a high height and they built in no competency, at least if they're competent, they will bounce and they'll come back up because they've got the skills to come back up. That's ultimately the difference. That's why when a person has so much hubris and then they fall, they might not be able to get back up. Which one is more important? I would say this is, but at a certain point, this needs to be cultivated in order for you to grow, essentially. The question is, which one needs to come first? Is this the chicken or the egg analogy? What needs to come first? Well, what I like to start off the day doing is having a workout. When I do a workout, I have feel-good endorphins running through my body, and so I'm essentially increasing my emotional state. I'm using action to increase my emotional state. However, I could use a substance, I could use cigarettes, I could use alcohol that will change my emotional state, and then I can get myself here. However, with the instant gratification of those substances, the crash is imminent. Whereas when you build your own emotional resilience and feel good hormones through doing activities which feel bad in the initial but greater moving forward, I'm still doing the same thing as a drug, but I am the curator of that drug, and it's a drug that lasts for much longer. So I start off my morning with action to improve my emotion. And with that emotion, I then look to increase my belief system so that I take greater action. This is some Tony Robbins shit right now, but I'm not attempting to be Tony Robbins. I'm just letting you know the dangers of you not residing in both worlds correctly. And if both worlds are too far, I don't think both can be the same at the same time. I do believe that you require ego to be higher. I do require that ego needs to be higher than what your outcomes are, because you're always needing something to aim for. So I could purely talk about myself. Whenever I've reached a goal, the happiness will last for, if I'm lucky, maybe a day. That's really pushing it. But give myself a few hours, I'll be like, and then I need my next goal. And so if you understand you're like this, you're ambitious, then what you're going to have to always do is know what's coming next. So once I get to this checkpoint, I can get, doesn't mean I can't enjoy it for a few minutes or an hour or everything when I get to that particular checkpoint, but so it's always checkpoints. You're always wanting to build it up as a checkpoint. So you're always wanting particular checkpoints wherever you currently are. And so if you're in your external world and you are currently here, and let's say, for example, this is, I believe I can write a book. And now you've wrote the books here, there. Boom, just done that. This one is, I know I'm going to have a good YouTube channel. And you reach that goal there. Whatever your next goal is, I can really only speak on myself, but I think a lot of people are like this. So people have grand visions for their life, and so they've gone all the way up here. But that is so dangerous if you're right at the bottom here. If you ain't got shit and you're wanting all of that, you're needing some evidence. And so you're needing these little checkpoints along the way. I do this in my day. My day will have I need to get closer to these goals. What must I do in this day to master this day in order to get me to where I need to go? And that's essentially what I do there. I do that. Where the hell's my red pen? It's here. So your belief needs to be around about here for this particular checkpoint. I don't think so much about these. Once I reach this point, then I think about this. So all my focus is on is this section right now. I've already achieved this. I need to now get here. And I might be struggling here, but I will remain here until I get to here. And this is where everything feels amazing. Everything feels amazing here. 4 or 5 minutes. But that's what I live for. And then you now check for the next one, and now you got to now work towards this next goal up here. And that's how it works. So if you don't have these mini things that you're doing to get to your greater goals, dangerous. Because here you are sat thinking, where have I seen this? It's even in your language. You'll talk to some people and they might even tell you what they want. They'll be like, I know one dude who once told me that they want to be a huge businessman and have an airport. I was like, this person's daily habits, far removed from that person, far removed. They're nowhere near there. And I thought this is a ridiculous claim to make. But we always make ridiculous claims. We just need to know what the steps are to get there. If you know the steps and you can at least do step 1, then step 2, then why can't you get all the way to the top? Because you're doing the right things. You're showing you're that type of person that can do it. This is the best place to be. Here's gold. Here's gold. Knowing you've done some things and you're along that way up, gold. You're in a gold standard place. But there are individuals out there who will go around telling people they're going to do all this, and they haven't done, and they're all the way down here and done nothing. When this person hits a particular age, that the reality is now dawning on them that they're all the way here, and even when they try and think of getting there, all they feel is resistance and pain. That person is in for hell. That is hell. That is hell. That is the hell of the arrogant, ambitious, lazy person. That is it. That is hell. And so when people reach this particular moment of hell, they'll have an ego death and they may not recover from that ego death. Their identity will collapse because they've most likely built up their social circle of people around them by overinflating what they're capable of doing, and then that world comes crashing in on them. This is pain and this is hell. This is one aspect to the internal and external world. It comes in many other forms. Essentially, the point I'm wanting to make with this video is everything I've basically spoken about, but having the belief in yourself is important, but you can play between both worlds by starting off here and bringing yourself back here. Ultimately, when you start gaining momentum, you're always going to have the internal world being higher than your external validation of reality. Because what happens there is you will start needing the world to validate what you're doing, when sometimes there's a task that is quite difficult and it might take you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 20 iterations for you to get it right. Think of an inventor in the past. Think of the creation of aeroplanes or the light bulb. They have to believe that they can create the aeroplane to now make the aeroplane. They need to understand aviation. Can things maintain in the air properly? How do you get them up to there? So once they understand all of these major components, then it's like, we can build a machine that can fly in the air. So these are all these are the major components that they need to get through to now have the larger belief. This is how it works, but you can play in between both. Ultimately, to be truly ambitious and get to what you want, you always have to have this higher, and you need the relative checkpoints in there to ensure you're on the right path. If you don't do this correctly, it's going to be a lot of pain for you, because you just like the feeling of believing what your life is going to be. And then what you do is you trick yourself by saying, I'm going to be this one day. And then you go back into fucking watching Netflix and being a degenerate that doesn't do anything. Done.